Welcome to the Myofascial Health Podcast, hosted by me, Unu. Follow along as I explore the depths of John Barnes' myofascial release approach on my road to mastery. Along the way, I'll be sharing the lessons I learn as I open my myofascial release practice in Austin, Texas, so that you don't have to make the same mistakes I do. Welcome back to the Myofascial Health Podcast. Now, I am joined here by a very special guest. She has been an occupational therapist since 1990. She has been a Reiki master since 2002, has started learning MFR about in 2003, and she's even started her own myofascial release business for the past 4 years. It's my honor to introduce Sister Bernadette Pierson. Thank you so much for joining me on this podcast.
Oh, thank you, but I'm no longer a sister, so yeah.
No longer a sister. Okay.
No longer a sister, but I am affectionately known in the myofascial world and affectionately known by John as Sister Bernadette.
And how did you even get that nickname?
So I have shared a lot of my stories during the MFR classes in which I felt safe to share some of that and also felt called to share some of that. It was when I first did the first unwound in my first time I took MFR1, I actually unwound it. Had no idea what was going on, but John led us, to go deep into ourselves and to really let go and to feel. And I did, and in that moment, and it was not a pleasant unwind. It actually went back into a car accident that I had. But my mind and my body were so connected at that point that I felt this was what true prayer really is. And I was a sister at that time. And I've had mystical experiences. I've had meditations. But this whole connection of mind, body, and then I feel mind, body, spirit is what is the powerful point behind MFR work. And that just opened myself up to a whole new level of connection into God and into connection into my own spirituality.
That's amazing. I think for those of us in myofascial release, we understand the different branches, and those would be, the structural work is one piece of it, unwinding that you've described is another piece of it, and then rebounding is another piece of it. And something that you had shared with me when I met you at a seminar was exactly this. You felt like unwinding was like prayer for the body. Can you define what prayer is?
So for me, prayer is really about connecting deep into yourself and deep into this universal life force energy that is always present, always around us, always able that we can connect into, anybody can connect into. That's what helps us to center. That's what helps us to be. And the myofascial unwinding to me is that whole connection of body, mind, spirit. And it doesn't have to look ugly or pretty, or it doesn't have to be big, huge unwinds. It can be something very simple and profound, but it's the unwinding part that I feel that we get into those deep personal connections. Mind, body, spirit, all one.
I would agree with those sentiments. Now, my walk with God is fairly new, and I'm only learning to pray in my life. And when you had described it as being prayer for the body, and now that I've started praying, I find myself trying to match the same teachings that John teaches when we're doing myofascial release. And that is exactly what you're saying. You have to be centered, you have to be grounded, you have to be present and very intentional. And it's about getting to this space where you drop down and you don't let the chaos of the outside world kind of get you thrown into that. And I just want to make that distinction between what prayer is and what prayer isn't. Because I think sometimes what we'll do is we'll ask for prayers on myofascial release insight or MFR insight. And while yes, there is power in community, and when everyone's praying together, I do think that there is an energy about that that can help so many things. But oftentimes, people, I think, are praying for symptoms to be gone, you know? Whereas what I truly believe prayer is for the cause of suffering to be gone. And it's not to pray that the world changes, but it's to pray that your mind can perceive it differently. And as I've read my Bible, when Jesus does these miracles, he says, your faith is what set you free, right? And so I think that's what we're getting to, where we believe in myofascial release because we believe in the principles and we believe in the work. And then through that, we've been able to help patients and clients who trust us enough to help them through their pains or injuries and help end their suffering. Now, for you, you have a very different journey into myofascial release. Can you talk us how you got into myofascial release?
So, as an occupational therapist, there was an instructor in my school that had taken one of the courses, and she just basically taught us a little bit about it, just, holding for 3 to 5 minutes. It was back then, and to look elsewhere for the cause. And so when I started working as an occupational therapist in the hospital setting, I had a client one time. I was also doing outpatient working with hands, and somebody came in. I forget exactly what was going on with their hand or their thumb or something, but the doctor wrote this long script, and we tried a couple things and it wasn't working. And I'm like, this idea of going further up the arm, feeling the tightness, holding the tightness, and seeing what happens. So I did, and she got a completely release and full hand function back. And so that was like, whoa, what is this? And so I was always interested in taking it. However, at that time, in the community that I was in, we were habits. And so there was no way that I could go to one of these courses and learn those techniques at that time. But it was always something in my heart and always something for me to desire to do later on. So when I did have the opportunity, I was actually transferring into another community that did not wear the habit and seeing what that felt like. And so that's when I had the opportunity to actually go to a class and really experience what this was about. And then another class, and then it was just like I have to keep going. I don't know how, why, what, when, where, but it was a calling. It to me it was like something I just had to do, and I wasn't even sure where it was going to take me.
That's amazing. I think a lot of us feel called to this work. You know, I have shared my journey into MFR, and that being something that wasn't anything that I knew to be the right answer, but I had this pull towards. Now, something you mentioned is you didn't have this, you wore a habit or not wearing a habit. What is that exactly?
So I was a sister, and so sisters and nuns are they use the same terminology. Nuns are when they're cloistered and they stay in the prayer all day or they work. Sisters actually are active and they're working in different communities, and we had hospitals. I worked in the hospital. The habit is what you wear. It's a form of dress that you wear. So I wore a veil that covered my head and the full dress. So that's the habit. And
Okay, and so when you say you take
yeah,
off the habit, that's you stepping away from
stepping.
sisterhood?
No, so when the order that I went into, they chose to wear regular clothes
Got it.
to connect in with other people. So they did not wear a distinguished religious garment.
Understood.
Yeah. There's so
Understood.
many habits out there, isn't there?
Yeah, there's very many, very many.
Being a nun
Okay.
could be habit forming, but
Exactly. I would not disagree with that statement at all. What's cool though is I think when you say, hey, they're in prayer all the time, that you learn to be in this space. You know, in myofascial release, what we're taught to do is to meet people at the barrier and wait with them at the barrier. And if you can find yourself in this intention of prayer, this atmosphere of prayer, then you're already doing that. So to hear that you came from that and then got introduced to myofascial release, and then now you're doing this work is so cool because I know that when I was first starting, to hold this myofascial release hold like a cross hands release for 5 minutes, even longer sometimes, seemed like such a long time because we're taught in the world to like do things. You got to be doing something. But just to sit there and wait with somebody in this intention of prayer is so unnatural for me, and I'm sure a lot of us. And so I think something that probably worked in your favor is you had developed this skill of waiting with people at the barrier or praying. And then once you got used to learning the techniques of how to apply that through your hands, now you're able to do myofascial release. Is that fair to say, or would you say it's been different for you?
No, I would say that's fair to say. I think, but when you're praying in the nunhood, you are sitting in silence and you are being centered, but you really don't touch anything. And so being, I think for me, doing myofascial where I can actually use my hands and my heart together is much more powerful. And that becomes to me true prayer because there's a connection now and resonance between both of us and being centered, both of us. We are within this universal life force energy, which to me is God. God is energy, and we are working together in this energy field that is just so powerful. So when I'm actually working on someone, I'm actually in prayer and we're in prayer together. And then afterwards, I also pray for those people before I touch them. So I go through my list of people that I've worked on all day and I send them love and light energy and I pray for them for continue to be healing, whatever that healing is supposed to be. And then I also pray for the people that I'm going to see for that morning and that whole day. So they get prayer while I'm working on them, and then they also get prayer afterwards too.
I love that. You know, I'm someone who gets to the office maybe like 30 minutes before and I'm going through the list and getting work done. And I think what I'm gonna take from you is take that time just to be centered and pray for the patients and clients that you have for that day. Something that I think you said that I love is you're praying together. You know, I think something that is different with myofascial release than other hands-on modalities is that we do it with them. We're not doing myofascial release to somebody, we're doing it with somebody. And they are very much an active participant through it all. Because if they're not, then we don't have that connection, right? And then it just becomes
Mhm.
kind of a lackluster thing. You know, if I'm just rubbing on you like that, and sure, it might feel good, but when we are in this centered space, then you are able to get deeper below the conscious level into the subconscious. And that's where different things will arise. You know, it could be big, like you said in your unwinding experience, you had kind of processed through a car accident, or it could be a small, subtle thing. And not to judge what it looks like, but just to be there and hold space for that person or that client and patient on the table. So I love how you said that. Now, something that you had said is true, I guess, authentic prayer is when you are able to connect your heart through your hands and with the other person. Now, for me being a physical therapist, there was a time if I would have heard that, I'd be like, what are you even talking about? You know? But
Yep.
now that I've learned and kind of released things that prevented me from feeling things with my heart space, I understand that. But for someone who's completely novice, who maybe, let's say, is an occupational therapist student and is like, hey, I know that myofascial release exists, but I have all this kind of scientific headspace. How would I even connect to my heart space? What would you tell them?
I would say, first of all, it's all about love and to connect into love for yourself, for others, and to let God love you. So many people we're so, and I am too, we get low self-esteem and self-worth. It's just something that's part of our human condition. And then we also, have stuff that have happened to us, and that builds in. And so, we have to connect to realize that God is an energy, and an energy of love and light. And God is always there to love us no matter what. We tend to judge ourselves, but God is the only one that can take our hearts, look at our hearts, see what's good and what's not good, and then just love us. And if we can just connect into that love, then we can be powerful in whatever we do. And if we can connect in with other people and resonate then through that love and let them receive that love, then that becomes even more powerful.
Yes, I think something that happens in the seminar series is John or Donna or whomever the instructors are, they create this container. And when you have this non-judgmental space where people are really vulnerable, it allows you to uncover these things that you might not even have thought that it still bothered you to this day. Like, oh, this happened a long time ago. I didn't think it was a big deal. It gets stored in your fascial system exactly the same. And so even though, let's say, someone had a blunt trauma where you're like, man, he got hit over the head like that, and you can see that. If someone has an emotional trauma, just because you can't see it doesn't mean it's there. So I think it's just a constant reminder to remember that everyone's going through their own journey and not to judge others for whatever they're going through. And I think that's something that we can all learn. And I think, just like you said, we've all had experiences where, whether it's, let's say our schooling system or society or our parents, these kind of judgments get projected onto us. And the worst thing that happens is you believe that. You believe these things that get told about you, and you forget that you are a child of God and that He looks at us with this unconditional love. And I think it's easy for us to say, hey, well, these are the experiences that I've gone through in life that have shaped us. And it's a tougher thing to let go. But I think that's definitely something we learn in myofascial release, and something that the Bible teaches is like, let go of these experiences that hold you back, that causes you to suffer and not get past these judgments, whether you're critical of yourself, your fear of judgment of others, or judge or fearful of pain or something like that. Whereas if you can just be centered, right? And accept things as they are and not what you hope for them to be or want them to be, that you will hopefully be able to let go of what you are holding on to and allow it just to be, and then learn from those experiences. Now, if someone is having a tough time doing that, I think I just saw a post in MFR Insight where someone was literally talking about this, where they're saying, it's been very hard for me to love myself. And they've done these things that on the outside look like this person has it all together. They've got a business, they're doing well, all these great things on the outside, but on the inside, they view themselves very differently. And just like you had said, I think you have worked through, whether it be self-esteem issues or something like that. What would you recommend for someone in that situation to do?
Wow. I think we're all in different spaces, and I think we all need each other. And I think reaching out to other people in that and not walk alone is huge. And that's the purpose, I think, of the MFR community, is that we have each other and that we can hold space for each other in those moments. It's interesting too, because I also have clients that come to me and they're struggling. They're struggling emotionally and they're struggling spiritually too. And so in my business, I also do a strange combination where I do, using the fascial cranium principles. I combine that to bring people into a very deep, relaxed, centered state. And then I add either myofascial principles or I just do energy work on them, depending on what they need. And then sometimes I just get called to lead people into a guided meditation. And if I'm truly connected into that universal source, I have no idea what I say because it just happens. And then afterwards, I have no idea what came out. But they tell me that whatever happened, they are transformed. And so sometimes we need each other, but we also need guidance of deeper meditation states and to help us to really let go and so that we can also move on and move forward because God really wants us to be happy, healthy, and whole. God does not want us to be suffering in this life. We're supposed to be happy, healthy, and whole. But part of the suffering is a lesson that helps us to learn how to be more whole or how to be more happy. So life is all about lessons. We get caught up sometimes in the drama of the lesson instead of just letting it be a lesson.
I love that. I think it's exactly that. I think there's a victim mentality that a lot of people can have where they say, man, this happened to me and this is why I do this, or my parents, da 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 da. And that doesn't help anybody. You're just kind of suffering in your own sorrow. But if you can shift your perspective, and whether that's prayer or anything else, where it's not about changing the world or the symptom, but it's changing your perception or your mindset around it to say, hey, instead of me being a victim and just complaining about it, what did I learn from the experience? And through that, you're able to take steps beyond what you were keeping yourself encaged with the other thoughts that cause the suffering. And so I love your answer. I think, something I asked was like, what would you do? And the answer you gave is it's not about what you do necessarily. It's what can you let go of. And I think that is something that I've been able to trust even more. I know early on, when I was taking my first MFR seminars, I would always ask questions like, hey, where's the hold? What direction of pull is it? They were very Channel 5. But once you learn the principles and you can learn what it feels like to drop in and not be stuck in your headspace, then the answers flow through you. I think in subtle energy, something that we learn is there's subtle energy all around us and everybody has access to it. But can you get to it and allow it to guide your work or the things that you do by turning off your brain because this is all around us. And I would go as far as to say, hey, this is God trying to speak to us, and the thing that blocks us is our own minds, our own heads and line of thinking. But just like you said, when you're able to treat somebody, and often when I'm treating somebody, I'll get questions like, oh, how did you know where to go? And I'll be like, I don't know the answer to that. It's just what I feel. And sometimes my hands are guided in a certain direction. Sometimes I'll feel it in my own body and I'll be like, okay, I don't think that low back pain is mine. I think it might be theirs. And then 9 times out of 10, whenever I touch them, they're like, man, my back has been killing me. How did you know? Because I'm in here for my shoulder, or something like that. And so just like what you had said, where you're like, a lot of times or all the time, I don't even know what I said, but the intention and energy is felt and it allows them to release in that manner because you're in resonance. Myofascial release, before it was coined release, John had originally named it myofascial resonance. And that's because we're trying to resonate with the people around us or the patients with us. And once you have that resonance, you're able to meld. And so that's why it's important to find a good myofascial release therapist who can do that because then the energy is amplified. I think a lot of times we or maybe I'm guilty of this. It's like, man, I can do this on my own. I can do this on my own. I don't need anybody's help. And one, I think that might be like a little trauma response. But I think as I've let go of that perception or that notion, and I'm like, okay, I can't ask for help. What happens if I do that? You know, oh, I actually get help, actually achieve things or do things in a much faster or more amplified energy than I would do on my own. You know, and it's letting go of this kind of lone wolf mentality because, like you said, this community is here for us and we can be a part of that. You know, I remember early on, I always felt like an outsider looking in, but the only thing that's changed is my perception of that, of like, oh, I'm part of this community. You know, I'm welcomed here. And I think when you come into myofascial release with the correct heart space, then it's not uncommon for anyone to hear that story and to resonate with it. When you first entered myofascial release, coming from your background, was it a hard transition or was it pretty seamless to you?
So actually, what was really interesting was I got it right away. I felt the energy. My intuition is really strong, and I felt the energy of doing the work. And I could, and by the end, I went ahead and took the 10 days. By the end of the 10 days, I could actually feel my hands in somebody's body unraveling the fascial web. But what's interesting is that later I end up taking another course, which I knew that I needed to just keep going. But then after I took more courses, I was like, I don't know what the hell I'm doing. Oh, excuse me. I don't know what the heck I'm doing. I really had to figure it out. And it took me a long time to process, to bring both technique and both intuition guided together. And I think, I think people get the work initially, or sometimes they don't have the intuition. And so they're struggling with that. But it takes a while to really sink in into what these techniques are really truly about and into the barrier and really understanding where is that barrier and what is that barrier. And for a long time, I was just using the principles just in my own personal life before I actually started really doing them on other people. I mean, I guess I was doing the techniques on myself, but in my own personal relationships, holding
Hmm.
the barrier for somebody, listening to them, letting go of my own prejudices or my own judgments, So I was just doing that, just living life like that before I really started to really get into the techniques and then to really start figuring it out.
That's awesome. You know, I think I've taken longer to get to living out the life principles of myofascial release. And it's just because I was tied to the old version that I was that it prevented me from eventually growing into this person I am today. And it can take time. So if anyone's going through this process, be patient with yourself. But there's this voice in the back of your head that will always push you and nudge you towards it. You know, if you ever are curious where your heart is, just look at where your mind wanders. And just like for me, when I was wanting to start a business, I had been telling myself that for 2 years before I actually did it, you know, but it's something that just constantly whispers to you, like, hey, you said you want to do this, you know? And so, just like you said, you know, it could take time. And just again, being in channel three is that patient mindset versus channel five is the impulse, and you want it right away. And just as a reminder for my listeners, John talks about two different channels, channel three and channel five. Channel three is like your right brain. It's like creative, intuitive, artistic, and there's not a whole lot of structure. And this is where love is thought to be. Versus channel five is more like your left brain. It's critical, it's linear, it's judgmental, impulsive. And this is where fear is thought to be. And so John is teaching us, hey, we need to live life and do myofascial release from channel three. And that's dropping down in, getting out of your headspace. And something that I believe is when you shift your mindset from a lens of fear to a lens of love, that in and of itself is a miracle. And so something that John will say is, when you're doing myofascial release, you'll see miracles and they will cease to amaze you because you'll just see them all the time. And I think it's exactly this. We're just dropping this lens of fear that gets projected onto us to this lens of love. And whether that's John or God, once you see the world through love and then you can embody that, life just gets a lot easier. You know, the struggle that you talked about or the suffering that people go through, it's because partly they feed into the fear, and it's the answer is right there. You know, it's like if you can just shed that lens, and it can be tough. But once you drop down and you see it from this lens of love, then you have everything to gain from that. Can you share about any experiences you have, whether it's myofascial release or your personal life, or maybe both, where you've learned to shed the lens of fear and looked at it through a lens of love?
That's a good question. I think I've had many experiences in which I really had to let go of my own self and my own critical self, my own self judgment on myself, that I'm not worthy to do this work, that, and the fear of even starting my own business, that was very fearful. And just trusting the process and trusting the people that come to me. And so, and there's even times where, you know, am I going to be good enough to do this work? Am I, that was early on, and sometimes you just, even now, sometimes you just wonder, you get a new client and you don't know what's going to happen. If you know what's going to happen, then you don't know what the hell you're doing, right? That's what John
That's
would teach
correct.
us. So that's why I always start with prayer, because that helps to release the fear inside of me. And also one of the Reiki principles is to just for today, I let go of worry. So that
Hmm.
teaches me too to just keep letting go. But I've also learned, like when I get a cancellation or something, I've learned to trust that. I've learned to, oh, because sometimes I get a cancellation and you think, oh my God, what's going to happen? But the next thing I know is somebody else needs that space, or I needed that space. So I've learned to just trust the universe and see what happens, and to let go of worry and to let go of fear.
I love that. You know, those of us who have started our own practices or businesses, there are fears that are associated with that. And when someone cancels on you, you take that personal, you know, and something that John recommends is us to read the four agreements. And one of the agreements is don't take anything personal, you know. But I remember early on when I started my practice and I got that cancellation, my mind would immediately go to, oh man, I'm not good enough. That's why they canceled. They canceled because X, Y, and Z because of me. And something I learned from Richard Hardy when I interviewed him, he said, you know, he takes all the pressure off. You know, he says, oh, if someone cancels, hey, that gives me space for somebody else to fill it who might need that. You know, and there's literally no taking it personal with him. And I think that's something that we can all learn. Can you share what fears you had with starting your business?
Oh, I had a lot of fears. And then it was like, I am not a business person. What am I doing? But what was happening was how it started was I had 7 people coming to my home every week during the month, one whole summer. And at the end of that, one of the person was a business person. And she said to me, I think it's time that you start your own business. And she said, I can help you, but I think you need to do that. And I was just like freaked out. I'm like, I don't know. Part of it is, being a nun, you live in community, you live a life of poverty, chastity, obedience. You don't have to worry about things. When you own your own business, all of a sudden you have to worry about, well, how am I going to get those clients? How am I going to make ends meet? How am I going to, how do I even sign up for different things to even run the business? And what I found was one day just morphs into another day. somebody is there to help you with something, and the next thing you know, something else happens. And so my business has actually grown by word of mouth. And now I have a couple doctors that come and see me, I have doctors that refer clients to me. And it's just, I don't really advertise. I don't really have time to advertise at this point. Just trust yourself and trust the process. Yeah.
So I love that. I think we all have fears of whether or not we can be business owners because it takes a total different skill set, right? And I know for me, when I was wanting to start my own business, I would read statistics like 90% of businesses fail and things like that. So who am I to say I'm part of this 10%? And you kind of, this is channel five thinking. You kind of get into this echo chamber of, I'm not good enough because of X, Y, and Z. And so you had shared that, like, who am I to start a business? I don't know anything about business. What do I got to sign up for? But that anxiety and anxiousness gets calmed down, I think, when you take action. When you take steps, you're like, okay, I did this thing, it wasn't that bad. And I've gotten closer to opening up or starting. For you to already have patients coming to your house, that's a big part of it. And I would say, yes, word of mouth referrals, there's nothing more powerful than that. When a family or friend recommends their families and friends to come see me, I take that as the biggest compliment ever. Now, for me, also, I do have to do some marketing on my side, and it's putting yourself out there. Now, obviously, I'm not as good as Sister Bernadette, she's got a long wait list and things like that, which is amazing, but I'm just not there yet. Remember that it's not a competition. And so even though I can hear Sister Bernadette say, hey, I've got a wait list, I just do word of mouth referrals, I don't advertise, I can just be happy for her. Man, that's amazing. And if you ever find yourself when someone's sharing good news about themselves and you take that personal, business ownership might not be for you, because if you take everything as a competition and you compare yourself, you're going to be the worst version of yourself. I think what we've echoed in this particular episode is look through the eyes of God. If you can see yourself through God's eyes, you will know that you're capable. You're worthy of doing this work, because guess what? If you are doing anything that's of service, and that's what we're doing in myofascial release, God is going to reward you if you're doing it for the right reasons. If you're doing it for the wrong reasons, oh man, and I used to start that way. I was like, oh, I got to do this business. I was like burning myself out because I thought, hey, if someone else is doing it, I got to do it. And I had to go to T for T and finally undo a lot of that stuff. And I'm like, man, the person who put all of this extra pressure on myself was me. And that's the worst place to be. But if you can just take steps each and every day, there's going to be a time when you look back where you say, oh, I have done a lot, but if you overthink it and put all this pressure and stress on yourself because you haven't started and you think, man, there's this huge mountain I got to climb, you just got to start and then let the pieces fall into place, like just like you've said, the right people came along at different times that were able to help you during those chapters. And I think that's it, like if you have the courage to start, that's a huge piece of it, but then as you get started, you just got to keep it going. And it's the version of yourself that you have to grow into that allows you to do that. And then ultimately you extinguish those fears that you had and you have a thriving practice like Sister Bernadette, or you have one that's going to be thriving like myself, but you just appreciate the process. You appreciate the journey and you're grateful to even have the opportunity, because otherwise you would just be complaining about a job that you're stuck in. So if you were to talk to that version of yourself, the one who was being told you need to start your business, but you're over analyzing why it won't work, what advice would you give to that version of yourself today?
I would say let go. Let go. Trust the process. It's all will be well. And just even use that mantra, all will be well, and to let go of yourself. So many times we judge ourselves and we don't need to be judging ourselves. The judgment is for God, not for us. And so if we can just let go and just trust the process, and just take one day at a time. And to realize all we have is this moment. That's it. There's no guarantee of tomorrow. We only have this moment. And so, how can we be the best that we can be in this moment? And to me, it's the best is about how I can be as loving to myself or as loving to others in this moment. That is what we're supposed to be called to. When Jesus said to be as perfect as my Father is not being perfect what we think is unreachable. The word is, how can I be as loving to others and to myself? And that is the true calling. Yeah.
I love that.
I just need to listen to myself.
There you go. Okay, before we get out of here, are there any last things you'd like to share with my audience?
I think be true to yourself. Let go. Stay centered. The one thing that I did learn, I did take subtle energy this month. And I really think what I learned a lot in that one is the importance of being able to receive.
Mm.
And so the receiving party, you need to be in a state of patience and centeredness so that they can receive. But also, how can you receive too? And because we receive from our clients as much as we give to our clients. It's a back and forth. And so trusting yourself, trusting the process, letting go, every day morphs into another day. And just let yourself have fun and let it be a prayer. Let it be a way of prayer.
I love that. I want to add one last thing just because I got reminded of it. But oftentimes in myofascial release, we get told or read this poem, and it's called A Return to Love by Marianne Williamson. And I just want to read that to end this podcast. And it says, our deepest fear is not that we are inadequate. Our deepest fear is that we are powerful beyond measure. It is our light, not our darkness, that most frightens us. We ask ourselves, who am I to be brilliant, gorgeous, talented, fabulous? Actually, who are you not to be? You are a child of God. Your playing small does not serve the world. There is nothing enlightened about shrinking so that other people won't feel insecure around you. We are all meant to shine, as children do. We were born to make manifest the glory of God that is within us. It's not just in some of us, it's in everyone. And as we let our own light shine, we unconsciously give other people permission to do the same. As we are liberated from our own fear, our presence automatically liberates others. I've read that poem multiple times through different chapters of my life, and different things will resonate. And so if you have the opportunity, I would strongly recommend you reading that from time to time and seeing what stands out to you. Now, how do people find you, Sister Bernadette, if they wanted to work with you?
Oh, so you can email me at bpierson, Pierson, and then the letters OSF, because I was a Franciscan nun, so Order of St. Francis. I still kept my email from the 1990s when I was still a nun at yahoo.com.
Awesome.
So
Thank you so much.
OSF.
You got it. Thank you so much for being open and honest with us. I love the insights that you shared and just your spirit. So I just want to thank you again so much for joining me on this podcast.
Oh, thank you. Thank you. And thank you for letting me be here. Yeah.
Thanks for listening to another episode of Myofascial Health. I help myofascial release therapists create beautiful websites for their MFR practices, even if they aren't tech savvy. If you're just starting your MFR practice, or you're an experienced MFR practice owner, learn more about how I can help at www.myofascial.health/website.